Most people believe blood sugar only climbs after a meal. But here is what nobody is telling you. For millions of people over 60, it rises in the dead of night silently, steadily while they sleep. Do something for me right now. Press 2 fingers gently against the inside of your wrist. Feel that rhythm? That quiet, persistent beat is your cardiovascular system working at this very moment, pushing blood through 60,000 miles of vessels, delivering glucose to your brain, your heart, your kidneys, every living cell you have. And for millions of people your age, something is hijacking that process after midnight, not because of what they ate, not because of a single choice they made. Their blood sugar rises during sleep because a system deep inside their body, one designed specifically to regulate glucose overnight, has quietly lost its support structure. It is not broken. It is starving for help. It is no longer receiving. Most people accept this as inevitability. They assume it is simply what aging does. That stronger medication is the only answer left. I want to challenge that assumption directly. My name is Dr. Alex Thompson. I have spent 26 years in metabolic medicine, working with patients whose blood sugar had become the defining anxiety of their daily lives. People who gave up bread, fruit, pasta, dinner with their families, who followed every instruction they were given, and still woke up every morning to a number on that glucose meter that made them feel like failures. That feeling is one of the most quietly devastating experiences I witness in clinical practice. And it is almost never the patient's fault. Because here is what most doctors do not explain. Controlling blood sugar is not solely about restricting what enters your body. Your body also possesses active systems for clearing excess glucose, and one of the most important ones operates almost entirely while you sleep. One of those systems involves an organ almost nobody associates with blood sugar at all: your kidneys. I know that surprises you. Most people connect the kidneys to hydration and blood pressure, but they play a precise, underappreciated role in your overnight glucose balance, and understanding that role changes everything about how you approach your morning number. Stay with me. Cast your mind back 10 years, maybe 15. You could finish a reasonable dinner, fall asleep without effort, and wake up genuinely rested. No parched throat dragging you to the kitchen at 2 a.m. No mental fog pressing down on you before your feet hit the floor. No glucose meter delivering a verdict that colored everything that followed. Something shifted. And the explanation you were handed was simple. Aging. The body changes. Accept it. I want to respectfully, firmly, push back on that. Yes, aging is real. Nobody is disputing biology. But the gradual erosion of overnight blood sugar control that millions of people over 60 experience is not purely the passage of time. It is the accumulated result of chronic metabolic inflammation, disrupted sleep architecture, and one thing almost nobody addresses directly: the body's glucose clearing systems losing the nutritional support they require to function. And here's what changes everything. Those systems can be supported again. The body retains more capacity for rebalancing than most patients are ever told. Now let me show you exactly what is happening, and I will keep the science human, because complexity serves no one. Picture your bloodstream as a river. Glucose is the current. When everything functions correctly, insulin acts as a precise regulator, channeling that current into your cells, converting it into fuel, keeping the flow controlled. But when insulin signaling weakens, when chronic inflammation quietly jams the receptors, glucose accumulates. The river floods its banks. Over years, that flooding corrodes blood vessels, peripheral nerves, the delicate microvasculature behind your eyes and inside your kidneys. This is the familiar part of the story. Here is the part most doctors skip. Your liver is one of the body's primary glucose manufacturing facilities. Overnight, when no food is entering your system, it releases stored glucose to keep your brain and organs supplied. Under normal conditions, a precise feedback signal tells it when to stop. In people with insulin resistance, that signal goes silent. The liver keeps producing. It overshoots, flooding the bloodstream with glucose your body never needed, and you wake up to a number that reflects a process that began hours before your alarm. This condition has a clinical name: hepatic glucose overproduction, and your dinner had almost nothing to do with it. That is where tonight's intervention begins. Before I tell you what the 3 ingredients are, I need to explain something that has likely been happening to you for years without anyone ever giving it a name. Have you ever gone to bed with a reasonable blood sugar reading, slept 8 hours without touching a single piece of food, and woken up to a number that was somehow higher than when you closed your eyes? That is not a mystery, that is biology. and it has a name: the dawn phenomenon. Here is what your body is doing in those quiet hours between 3 and 7 inches the morning. It is preparing you to live another day. Cortisol begins rising. Growth hormone pulses. Adrenaline edges upward. These are ancient, intelligent signals, your internal alarm system warming the engine before you even stir. Part of that preparation involves your liver releasing a surge of glucose into the bloodstream. Morning fuel. By design, in a metabolically healthy person, insulin rises to meet that surge precisely, and blood sugar holds steady. But in someone with insulin resistance, which describes a significant portion of people over 60, that insulin response arrives too slowly, too weakly, or both. Glucose climbs before your eyes open. You wake up already behind. This means your morning number is not a report card on yesterday's dinner. It is a measurement of how precisely your liver responded to hormonal signals fired at 4 a.m. That distinction matters enormously, because the right compounds, taken before sleep, can directly support that hormonal sensitivity overnight. Now, one more system deserves your attention before we get to the ingredients, and it has become one of the most consequential discoveries in metabolic medicine in the past decade. Your gut microbiome. The trillions of bacteria living in your digestive tract are not passive residents. Specific strains produce short-chain fatty acids as they ferment dietary fiber compounds that travel directly to the liver and sharpen its sensitivity to insulin signaling. When those bacterial populations are healthy and diverse, your metabolic communication improves. When they are depleted by processed food, antibiotics, or chronic stress, the signals go quiet and blood sugar regulation deteriorates. One of the 3 ingredients I am about to describe acts as a prebiotic, actively feeding and rebuilding those bacterial communities, while simultaneously supporting glucose regulation through entirely separate pathways. 3 ingredients, multiple mechanisms, one simple nightly habit. Let us get into it. The 3rd ingredient is almost certainly sitting in your kitchen right now. You have cooked with it. You have seen it in the spice aisle your entire adult life. And I would bet that almost nobody has ever told you what decades of peer-reviewed research have revealed about what it does inside a body struggling with blood sugar. Turmeric. Specifically, the active compound concentrated within it, curcumin. Here is what curcumin does that makes it genuinely remarkable for people over 60. The central problem in type 2 diabetes is not simply excess glucose. It is that your cells have stopped listening. Insulin arrives at the cellular door, delivers its message: absorb this glucose, convert it to energy, and the cells respond with silence. The glucose has nowhere to go. It stays in the bloodstream, circulating, accumulating, damaging. What drives that cellular deafness? In large part, inflammation. Not the inflammation you feel when you sprain an ankle. The other kind, low-grade, symptomless, chronic, quietly smoldering inside your tissues for years, steadily corrupting the molecular machinery your cells use to receive insulin signal. Curcumin targets this process with unusual precision. It suppresses a protein complex called NF-kappa B, which functions as one of the primary ignition switches for metabolic inflammation. When NF-kappa B activity decreases, the inflammatory interference around insulin receptors quiets. The receptors become more responsive. Glucose begins moving where it belongs. But curcumin's role does not stop at the receptor. Your pancreatic beta cells, the specialized cells that manufacture insulin, are also under siege in people with long-standing insulin resistance. Chronically elevated blood sugar and sustained inflammation gradually erode their function and their numbers. Curcumin's antioxidant properties appear to offer measurable protection to these cells, helping preserve the body's remaining capacity to produce insulin at all. That is not a minor footnote. That is protecting the source. One critical detail most people never learn: curcumin alone is poorly absorbed. Take it without help, and most of it passes through you without ever reaching your bloodstream. The solution is sitting right next to the turmeric in your spice cabinet. Black pepper. A single small pinch. The piperine it contains has been shown to increase curcumin absorption by up to 2,000%. Without it, you are getting a fraction of the benefit. Always include the black pepper. Always. The 2nd ingredient carries more published clinical research behind it than almost any other natural compound ever studied for blood sugar regulation. But there is a problem, and it is sitting in most people's spice cabinets right now. Ceylon cinnamon. Not the cinnamon you recognize from the grocery store shelf. That variety cassia cinnamon, imported primarily from China and Vietnam, is what fills roughly 90% of the American spice market. In the small amounts you sprinkle on oatmeal, it is harmless. But when researchers investigate cinnamon's metabolic effects in clinical settings, cassia is not what produces the results. Ceylon cinnamon, grown in Sri Lanka, is a biologically distinct variety, and the difference between them is not trivial. Here is what Ceylon cinnamon does inside your body that makes it worth seeking out specifically. It contains a concentrated class of polyphenols that behave at the molecular level in a way that partially mimics insulin. They activate the same cellular pathways that insulin uses to signal glucose absorption, meaning your cells can receive a directive to take in glucose even when your own insulin is underperforming. For someone over 60 whose insulin signaling has weakened over decades, that is a meaningful backup mechanism operating quietly in the background. Ceylon cinnamon also slows gastric emptying, the rate at which your stomach releases digested food into the small intestine. When that process decelerates, carbohydrates reach your bloodstream gradually, rather than in a sudden flood. The post-meal glucose curve flattens. The peak is lower. The descent is smoother. And critically, by the time you go to sleep, significantly less residual glucose remains circulating in your blood. That matters enormously for your morning number. Your liver begins its overnight glucose production, working from whatever metabolic environment you carry into sleep. A flatter evening curve means the liver has less excess to compound. The dawn phenomenon still occurs, but it rises from a lower baseline, and lower baselines produce better mornings. Clinical trials have documented this effect consistently enough that mainstream nutrition journals now treat it as established rather than emerging science. The dose required is not dramatic. Half a teaspoon of Ceylon cinnamon daily taken in the evening is sufficient to produce measurable metabolic benefit over weeks of consistent use. Small, specific, remarkably effective. And now we arrive at the ingredient that genuinely stopped me in my tracks the first time I studied the research behind it. Not because it is exotic, not because it is expensive or difficult to find, but because something this nutritionally powerful, this extensively documented, remains almost entirely unknown to the patients who need it most. Moringa Oleifera. This tree has been cultivated across South Asia, East Africa, and Central America for centuries, not as folklore, but as functional medicine embedded in agricultural tradition. Its leaves contain more vitamin C than oranges, more calcium than milk, more iron than spinach, and a complete amino acid profile that has no reasonable comparison in the plant kingdom. But none of that is why it leads this combination. Moringa earns its place because of what it does specifically inside a metabolic system under stress. And it does not work through one pathway. It works through three simultaneously. The first involves an enzyme inhibitor called chlorogenic acid, the same compound concentrated in green coffee beans, and now extensively studied for glucose regulation. Chlorogenic acid blocks specific digestive enzymes responsible for breaking complex carbohydrates into glucose. When those enzymes are suppressed, digestion slows. Glucose enters your bloodstream gradually rather than in a surge. The post-meal spike, the event that sets the tone for your entire overnight glucose environment, is measurably blunted. The second mechanism operates at the cellular level. Moringa contains isothiocyanates, sulfur-based compounds that penetrate cell membranes and enhance the internal signaling pathways cells use to recognize and respond to insulin. This is cellular insulin sensitivity being rebuilt from the inside. The third mechanism is the one most directly relevant to your morning number. Moringa's antioxidant compounds reduce oxidative stress inside liver cells, the precise environment where the hepatic glucose overproduction problem originates. When liver cells are less damaged, their feedback receptors function more accurately. The liver reads overnight signals more precisely. It releases less glucose than it otherwise would. Slower absorption, sharper cellular response, calmer liver signaling overnight. A study published in the Journal of Food Science and Human Wellness documented meaningful reductions in fasting glucose levels among type 2 diabetic patients using Moringa consistently over several weeks. What patients consistently report matches the data. Mornings that become quieter. Numbers that stop surprising them. A range that narrows, week after week, into something they can finally predict. That predictability is not a small thing. For many people, it is everything. Most people focus entirely on what to take. Almost nobody asks when. That distinction may matter more than anything else I have shared today. Your body does not operate on a flat, uniform schedule. It runs on circadian rhythms, precise 2-4-hour biological programs that determine when your liver is most active, when hormones peak and fall, when cellular repair initiates, and critically, when your metabolic systems are most receptive to outside influence. Consider this. Insulin sensitivity in a healthy adult is measurably higher at 7 inches the morning than at 7 inches the evening. The identical meal, eaten 12 hours apart, produces a demonstrably different glucose response. Your body processes the same carbohydrates more efficiently at breakfast than at dinner, not because of willpower or habit, but because your biology is literally more equipped for glucose management earlier in the day. That same logic, applied in reverse, reveals something important about the evening hour. In the 60 minutes before sleep, your body enters a distinct transitional state. The liver begins recalibrating its overnight glucose output. The pancreas adjusts its insulin baseline. Digestive activity winds down. Cellular repair systems come online. Your entire metabolic architecture is shifting from the demands of the day toward the regulatory work of the night. This is precisely the window when Moringa, Ceylon, cinnamon, and curcumin become most strategically valuable. Introduced during this transition, these compounds do not work against the current, they work with it. They are present at exactly the moment when overnight glucose patterns are being established. Chronobiology applied to nutrition. Timing that transforms 3 good ingredients into one coherent, targeted intervention. The preparation is simpler than you are probably expecting. In a cup of warm water, or a mild herbal tea if you prefer, combine 1 teaspoon of Moringa leaf powder, half a teaspoon of Ceylon cinnamon, a small pinch of turmeric, and a small pinch of black pepper. Stir thoroughly. Drink it warm, 30 to 60 minutes before sleep. That is the complete protocol. No complicated regimen. No collection of pills. Just 4 inexpensive, increasingly accessible ingredients taken together. At the right moment. Consistently. I want to be direct about what this is. It is not a cure. It does not replace prescribed medication. What the research supports is genuine metabolic assistance, creating favorable conditions for your body's own overnight systems to function with greater precision. The people who see results are not the ones who try it twice. They are the ones who give it 30 days and let the trend speak. Before we go further, there is one mineral I need to address, because it sits at the intersection of everything I have described, and its absence quietly undermines all of it. Magnesium. It participates in over 300 biochemical reactions in the human body. Among the most consequential, it acts as a cofactor for insulin receptors. Without adequate magnesium physically present at the cellular level, insulin signaling degrades even when insulin itself is circulating in perfectly normal amounts. The receptor cannot complete its function. The door mechanism fails regardless of who is knocking. Here is where it becomes genuinely alarming. High blood sugar directly accelerates magnesium loss through the kidneys. The worse your glucose control, the more magnesium your body excretes. The more magnesium you lose, the weaker your insulin signaling becomes. A self-reinforcing cycle, working silently against you. This is one reason Moringa belongs in this combination. It is among the most magnesium-dense plants available, delivering this critical mineral alongside its other active compounds in a single evening dose. Now the most underappreciated metabolic tool available to you. It costs nothing, requires no prescription, and the research behind it is unambiguous. A walk after dinner. Your skeletal muscles possess a remarkable capability called non-insulin-mediated glucose uptake. When muscles are actively contracting, walking, climbing stairs, moving through any gentle activity, they pull glucose directly from the bloodstream through a pathway entirely independent of insulin. They do not wait for insulin signal. They act unilaterally. A 10 to 15-minute walk within an hour of finishing your evening meal measurably flattens the post-dinner glucose curve. Less residual glucose circulates as you move towards sleep. The liver begins its overnight work from a lower baseline. The dawn phenomenon rises from a quieter starting point. Your morning number reflects the compounding benefit of both the walk and the nighttime drink working in sequence. Finally, sleep. Not as a comfort consideration, as a metabolic one. A single night of disrupted sleep has been shown to reduce next-day insulin sensitivity by a clinically meaningful percentage. Chronically fragmented sleep is one of the most reliable predictors of worsening blood sugar control I observe in practice. Elevated cortisol from poor sleep triggers the liver to release glucose, adding another layer to the overnight production problem we have already discussed. A consistent bedtime. A cool, dark room. No screens in the final hour. These are not lifestyle suggestions. They are metabolic interventions. There is something I need to say that has nothing to do with biochemistry. And in 26 years of clinical practice, I have come to believe it matters just as much. Living with elevated blood sugar is exhausting in a way that nobody adequately prepares you for. Not just physically, emotionally. Every morning, before you have spoken a word to another person, before you have eaten a single thing, you perform a small ritual that ends with a number. And for millions of people over 60, that number has the power to determine the emotional temperature of the entire day that follows. A good reading, and you feel cautious optimism. A bad one and something quietly deflates inside you before breakfast. I have sat across from patients who apologized to me for their glucose numbers, who lowered their eyes when they handed me their meter logs, as though the readings were a confession of personal failure, who had stopped checking altogether, not out of indifference, but because the daily verdict had become too painful to face. I want to say this as plainly as I know how. Your blood sugar number is not a measure of your character. It is not evidence of weakness, or laziness, or insufficient effort. It is a physiological reading inside a body navigating decades of cumulative metabolic stress genetics it did not choose. A food environment engineered against it. Years of disrupted sleep, and an inflammatory burden that accumulated long before anyone thought to address it. The frustration you carry is legitimate. The fatigue is real. The grief over a body that no longer responds the way it once did, that is real too. And it deserves to be acknowledged rather than dismissed. But here's what I have witnessed repeatedly in patients your age. In their 60s, their 70s, occasionally their 80s, the body retains a remarkable willingness to shift when it is genuinely supported, not punished, not restricted into compliance. Supported, with consistency, intelligence, and patience, applied across weeks and months, rather than days. The patients I have watched reclaim meaningful ground did not do it through suffering. They did it through small, targeted, nightly habits that worked with their biology rather than against it. Your history with blood sugar is not your destiny. The number from this morning is a data point, nothing more. The trend you build from tonight forward, that is the real story. And it has not been written yet. Here is exactly what to do. Starting tonight, the nighttime drink 30 to 60 minutes before sleep. 1 teaspoon Moringa leaf powder. Half a teaspoon Ceylon. Cinnamon, the label must say Ceylon specifically. A small pinch of turmeric. A small pinch of black pepper, combined in warm water or a mild herbal tea. Stir thoroughly until fully incorporated. Drink it slowly, while it is still warm. That is the foundation. Everything else builds around it. After dinner, before the drink, walk for 10 to 15 minutes. Not exercise, not effort. A relaxed, unhurried walk around the block, through your neighborhood, even through your home if the weather does not cooperate. Your muscles do not require intensity, they require movement. That distinction matters. Any gentle, sustained contraction activates the glucose uptake pathway that bypasses insulin entirely and flattens the post-dinner curve before it can compound overnight. Your sleep environment. Consistent bedtime. Cool, darkened room. Screens off in the final hour. These are not peripheral suggestions. They are direct metabolic interventions that reduce overnight cortisol and protect the insulin sensitivity you will need the following morning. Every morning, check your fasting glucose at the same time, before anything enters your body. Write the number down, not to judge it, to collect it. At 30 days, open that log and look at the arc, not individual readings, but the direction of the trend. Is the average drifting downward? Is the range compressing? Are the unexplained morning spikes becoming less frequent? That trajectory is the only honest measure of whether the protocol is working for your specific biology. Practical questions I hear consistently. Already on metformin or other medication? Keep taking it. Inform your doctor you are adding these compounds, as consistent use may contribute to lower blood sugar, and your physician may want to monitor more closely during the first few weeks. Where to find Moringa? health food stores, online retailers, and increasingly in mainstream grocery stores. Choose pure Moringa leaf powder with no additives. The color should be a deep, vivid green pale or yellowish powder indicates age and diminished potency. The taste is too earthy? Brew it in chamomile or ginger tea rather than plain water. A small amount of fresh ginger is a reasonable addition. It improves the flavor considerably and carries its own modest glucose-supporting properties. How will you know it is working? Your fasting number is the primary signal. But watch also for steadier morning energy, less nighttime thirst, and a general sense of metabolic calm throughout the day. These are not subjective impressions. They are your physiology recalibrating. There is one more driver of elevated blood sugar that almost nobody addresses in clinical practice. Not diet, not inactivity, stress. When cortisol rises, whether from financial pressure, relationship tension, a sleepless night of anxious thinking, your liver receives a direct chemical signal to release glucose into the bloodstream. Emergency fuel. By evolutionary design, your ancestors burned that glucose running or fighting. You burn none of it staring at a screen or lying awake at midnight rehearsing tomorrow's problems. The glucose simply accumulates, night after night, and the morning number reflects it. This is why the evening habits I have described are not comfort rituals dressed up as medicine. They are medicine. A warm drink, a slow walk, screens off, a consistent bedtime. Each one directly lowers the cortisol environment your body carries into sleep. A calmer nervous system means a calmer liver. A calmer liver means more precise, overnight glucose regulation. The metabolic environment you enter at sleep is shaped entirely by the hour preceding it. That hour is within your control. I want to be clear about what this protocol is. Moringa, Ceylon cinnamon, and curcumin have individually demonstrated meaningful effects on blood sugar regulation across multiple peer-reviewed studies. Their combination, taken during the body's overnight regulatory window, creates genuine metabolic support, not a cure, not a replacement for prescribed medication, but intelligent, evidence-based assistance for systems that are already trying to do their job. The people who benefit most are the ones who understand why it works and commit to 30 days of consistency. In my next video, I am going to reveal something that millions of people with elevated blood sugar do every night after dinner, something they believe is completely harmless, that is quietly making their morning numbers worse. Once you understand the mechanism, you cannot unsee it. I'm Dr. Alex Thompson. Take care of yourself tonight.